Hello and welcome to Opt to Thrive, episode 35, Gut Health Basics, How to Have a Happy Gut.
Welcome to Opt to Thrive, your go-to podcast for women's wellness in midlife, designed to educate, support, and inspire you to live your very best life. And now your host, Dr. Karina Sims.
Hello and welcome today. It's been a bit of a long day. I am recording this on an evening and I have spent the day in Adelaide with my husband. We went to see my stepson play football, so that was really good. And my son and his girlfriend came and watched the game with us, so we got to do a bit of a catch up, which was really nice. It was a bit of a grey, dreary day. I am looking forward to some warmer weather because it's been a bit cold, but the almond blossoms have started to come out. So that means we're not far off. And I am not sure that the river water can get much colder. So that's good. I am thinking that we're not too far away. So today I want to talk about a topic that I have gotten some requests about. I have wanted to do this topic probably from, the first months that I started doing the podcast. And I had actually sat down to start looking into it at one point, but it got a little bit complex and I probably got lost out in the weeds and decided to put it on the back burner. But I've gone back to it and have actually really enjoyed doing this little bit of a deep dive. So today I want to talk about one of those gifts of menopause that I've talked about before. In particular, it's gut health and discovering fiber. Well, not really discovering fiber, but discovering how much fiber I wasn't getting that I thought I was getting. It sounds boring, I know, but hear me out because I can almost guarantee that this is affecting you too. Now, how do I know this? Because 4 in 5 of us are not getting enough. I myself was really late to the fiber party because I was like a lot of you out there thinking that I get plenty. I really thought I was getting enough. I love my veg. I eat a lot of vegetables. I eat vegetables for lunch. I have vegetables at dinner. So it wasn't until my body started to really suffer through this midlife period and I noticed a real shift in my body composition and, I'd put on that body fat that I wasn't overly happy with. A lot of that was around my midsection. And when I decided to take a step back and have a look at the things that I was putting into my body and how they were impacting how my body was functioning, I eventually had a look at my fiber intake and I was really, really surprised. I took some time and started tracking it and I was gobsmacked. I couldn't believe how far off the mark I was. I was probably a bit better than average. As women, we should be getting at least 25 grams a day. And as we age, there's evidence to suggest we should be hitting even higher numbers, probably 30, 35 grams a day. I learned a lot as I put all those veg into my tracker. A half a gram here, a half a gram there, a little bit here, a little bit there. It turns out it takes a lot of vegetables to get that much fiber. I have traditionally not eaten a lot of grains in breads or cereals or other types of grains because I always thought that they had too many calories, so I avoided them and instead chose other things that weren't so great. And I have a bit of a sweet tooth. Well, quite a bit of a sweet tooth. And so in the past, if it were going to be a choice between fruit or a Snickers bar, for instance, it was going to be a Snickers bar every day of the week. But now that I've been really focusing on fiber, that has really changed. And I have really developed a taste for fruit that I've never had before, which has been a beautiful side effect of changing the way that I approach my diet. So then when I started to pay attention to where I could get more fiber in a calorie efficient way, I was really truly amazed at what happened. I know it sounds really silly, especially coming from a physician, but I'm telling the world, and I'm doing it for a good reason. I could not believe how well my gut could function. One of my very earliest memories was of my mother taking me to the emergency room with a stomach pain, which ended up being due to constipation. I was probably like 3 years old. So then it just made sense all of these years that I just had a sluggish gut. And even I was caught out assuming that all those vegetables were giving me plenty of fiber. We know, though, that making you regular is only one of the amazing benefits of fiber. So today I want to break it all down for you. I want to prove that you can have the bread and the cereal and still have the body composition that you want. There's more to it, obviously. I'm not talking about Fruit Loops and low nutrient breads, but that is part of what we're going to get in today. We're going to talk about how increasing the fiber in your diet can actually help you lose body fat. We'll talk about all the other benefits you're going to get to, how to get that much fiber. I'm going to share a few of my go-tos that I use. We're going to talk about the difference between soluble and insoluble fiber, which is going to lead us beautifully into a little dive into gut health and probiotics and supplements, all the things. So let's get started. Now, generally speaking, fiber is the part of plant foods that our bodies can't fully digest. It passes through the gut doing some pretty amazing things to help keep our digestion regular, support our gut health, and keep us feeling full. There are 2 types of fiber, soluble and insoluble fiber. Let's talk a little bit about the differences and whether it really matters which ones we get. Soluble fiber is the type of fiber that's soluble. It dissolves in water. Some soluble fiber is viscous, so it makes a gel-like material. You can find it in foods like oats and barley, legumes, psyllium, and the fleshy bits of fruits and vegetables. Soluble fiber increases the amount of water in our stools, and it softens it, which is how it helps the stool along and to pass easily. Now, psyllium, as I just mentioned, is a soluble fiber, and it is what we find in Metamucil, the laxative you can buy at the shops. It works by absorbing water in the gut, which forms a gel that increases the bulk of the stool. This bulkiness stimulates peristalsis. That is just the contracting of the bowel that helps kind of move the stool along the bowel to get it to the other end. This gel also keeps the stool moist, which then gives it some lubrication. So together, the lubricating and the bulking properties is how it works as a laxative. Psyllium is a bit of a standout when it comes to fiber, and we're going to talk a bit more about some of its unique qualities when we talk about fermentation a bit later. Now, let's talk about the other type of fiber, insoluble fiber. Insoluble doesn't dissolve in water. Makes sense. This kind of fiber is mainly found in whole grains, wheat bran, and the skins of fruits and vegetables. Insoluble fiber helps our gut stay regular by giving the stool its bulk. It's actually really interesting in how this type of bulk helps with bowel movement regularity. We used to think that the laxative effect from insoluble fiber was because it could hold a lot of water. But what we now know is it's actually because the coarse particles themselves in insoluble fiber cause irritation in the wall of the large bowel. And this irritation causes the bowel to make mucus and secrete water, which gives the stools moisture and also helps to lubricate them to make them easier to pass. I read about an interesting experiment that illustrated this mechanism beautifully. In the experiment, they had people ingest small plastic particles in the same shape and size of coarse wheat bran. And they found that these plastic particles also caused a laxative effect. But if they cut the particles smaller and smoother, like fine ground wheat bran, they didn't have the same effect. In fact, fine wheat bran can actually be constipating because it can't hold water very well and it doesn't mechanically irritate the bowel wall. So when it gets to the large bowel where our body normally absorbs water to keep us hydrated, fine wheat bran can't hold on to its water very well, so the bowel can actually suck the water out of it and make it a hard, dry stool. Ouch. Now, it isn't recommended to eat plastic bits. I just thought it was an interesting study and a good way to illustrate the mechanism. Now, I mentioned fermentation a bit earlier, and this process is important to talk about as we get into the gut microbiome. So let's talk about what the gut microbiome actually is. We have trillions of microorganisms, viruses, fungi, and bacteria living in and on our bodies. And a good portion of these are in our gut. They make up our gut microbiome. Our microbiota, so the bugs in our gut, are formed by different mechanisms and sources. It's related to our genetics, our diet, environment, and habits. All of these things play a part. So from birth until we're about 3 years old is when we develop our gut microbiome. And as we age, other things can affect the microbiome like diet, hygiene practices, exposure to pollutants and chemicals, medications like antibiotics, psychological stress, and lifestyle factors like physical activity, sleep patterns, social interactions. Our microbiome is pretty resilient, so some of those impacts are minor and temporary, but others, especially if they're prolonged, can be more long-term. Our diets have certainly changed from generation to generation. We certainly aren't eating as much fiber as we once did. I found one paper that estimated ancient hunter-gatherers who mainly ate fruit and wild grains ate more than 100 grams of fiber a day. I've never eaten 100 grams, I don't think. I don't think I've ever eaten more than 50 grams. I did speak to someone the other day who had over 60 grams in a day. That's quite an effort. So yes, our diets have changed since the old hunter-gathering times. And some of the statistics I found estimated that most of us women would eat less than 12 grams of fiber in a day. So that's less than half of what's recommended. So these changes in our diets have changed our microbiome over time, and that has had some pretty big impacts on our health. And I'm going to talk about more health-related things related to fiber a bit later. Now, our microbiomes are all different, and each microbiome has hundreds of thousands of different bacterial species. I did read that our microbiome can be as distinctive as a set of fingerprints. Is that true? I'm sure that's what you're asking. That's what I was asking. So then, of course, that sent me down another rabbit hole. So apparently, our microbial profiles can be used for personal identification with high, but not perfect accuracy. So it's probably not going to be showing up in a court of law like DNA. Well, actually, your DNA will be in your poop. So maybe in a roundabout way, it could be used in a court of law. Anyway, I digress. Okay, so this leads us beautifully into pre- and probiotics, which is going to also finally get us back to explaining that fermentation process that I mentioned before. So prebiotics are essentially food for our gut bugs, our little microbes. Most prebiotics are a type of fiber, but not all fibers can be classified as a prebiotic. Prebiotics are indigestible parts of food that our body's own gut enzymes can't break down. So that food gets all the way to the large bowel, where it's then broken down by the bacteria there. This process is called fermentation. So fermentation essentially is feeding our gut bacteria. Feeding the gut bacteria, fermentation, results in the production of these little things called short-chain fatty acids and gas. These short-chain fatty acids do heaps of really good things. They nurture the cells in the bowel wall. They lower the pH in the bowel to limit the growth of other nasty little bugs. They help with immunity and inflammation, and they can help prevent and or have therapeutic effects on several diseases like cardiovascular disease, liver disease, diabetes mellitus, inflammatory bowel diseases, and colorectal cancer and obesity. So by getting enough prebiotics in our diet, we can improve the number and variety of bacteria in our gut, which supports better overall gut health. And when we don't fuel our gut bacteria with enough prebiotics, then those bacteria have to find fuel somewhere. There have been some animal studies that show bacteria can eat away at the mucus layer in the gut. We need that mucus layer to protect us from other invaders that can cause harm. So it really is a good idea to have plenty of prebiotics on board. Some particularly good foods that are naturally high in prebiotics are things like vegetables, fruits, whole grains, nuts, and seeds. So Jerusalem artichokes, garlic, onion, asparagus, cabbage, snow peas, green peas, leeks, apples, grapefruits, pomegranates, nectarines, oats, wheat, barley, rye crackers, pistachios, cashews, and legumes. So red kidney beans, soybeans, chickpeas, lentils. So those are all just some examples. Now, back to that fermentation that we talked about. You may have heard of, or even maybe have been recommended by your doctor to try a low FODMAP diet. So FODMAP stands for fermentable oligosaccharides, disaccharides, monosaccharides, and polyols. They are all types of sugars. And foods high in these types of sugars are fermented, so broken down by our bacteria, at a quick rate. And they can cause discomfort and gas, especially in people who suffer from irritable bowel syndrome. So a diet low in FODMAP foods is often recommended for people who suffer from IBS, irritable bowel syndrome. There's a lot of good information out there about low FODMAP diets. The low FODMAP diet came out of Monash University here in Australia, and they're a really good resource for accurate information if you want to know a bit more about that. Now let's move on to probiotics. The formal definition for probiotics is live microorganisms that, when administered in adequate amounts, confer a health benefit on the host. So essentially, prebiotics are the food for the microorganisms or bugs, and probiotics are the good bugs or good microorganisms that we can add to the gut. So probiotics are mainly bacteria, but can also be yeasts. They can be found in some fermented foods like yogurt. They can be added to certain food products, and they're also available as supplements. Many different formulations of probiotics, capsules, powders, and sachets are available from supermarkets, pharmacies, and health food stores. Products containing probiotics that are classified as food, i.e. yogurt, are not subjected to the same rigorous processes for labeling and listing as those applied to medicine. So just something to take note of. Now, probiotics have several actions in the gut. They can compete with the nasty bugs for nutrition, make gut contents acidic, which again makes it harder for those bad bugs to survive, and they can boost our own immune response. Probiotics have been tested the most for IBS, irritable bowel syndrome. Some probiotics seem to help people with IBS, and others don't seem to help. The bugs that do seem to help the most are called Bifidobacterium and Lactobacillus. However, not all experts recommend probiotics for IBS because the scientific evidence is limited. There has been a lot of scientific evidence that shows that probiotics can help prevent and lessen diarrhea when you take antibiotics. So if you're going to try this, take the probiotic while you're taking the antibiotic, but just take it at a different time. So if you're taking an antibiotic in the morning and evening, take the probiotic in the middle of the day. There's also some evidence that probiotics can be helpful for episodes of diarrhea caused by infection. One note, though, is that most studies have been done in children, which I suppose children probably do get a lot more gastro than adults do. But when probiotics are used at the same time as rehydration, it looks like they can decrease how long the diarrhea lasts for by around 25 hours, and also can decrease the risk of the diarrhea lasting longer than 4 days. From the literature, it doesn't look like there are any overly important differences in the probiotic effect related to the type of strain, the number of different strains included, the viability of the organisms, or whether low dose or high dose preparations are used. There's also no agreed ideal duration of treatment, but it looks like 5 to 10 days is what's generally recommended. Where I probably get asked most about probiotics is around antibiotic use and vaginal thrush. Unfortunately, ladies, there's no great evidence that probiotics are going to help prevent vaginal thrush after taking antibiotics. Probiotics are thought to be safe for most people. We've been using probiotics for more than 100 years without much trouble, but they are best avoided if you are immunocompromised, you're severely debilitated, or critically ill. Now, I want to talk about a few more things that might just entice you to this fiber party I'm talking about. Let's start with diverticular disease. So diverticular disease is a condition that develops as we age. Somewhere around 10% of us over the age of 45 will have it. And this number climbs to somewhere around 65% over the age of 70. Now, diverticular disease refers to these little pockets that form in the bowel. The problem is that these little pockets can get inflamed. It's thought that they might get a little bit of fecal matter impacted in them where it gets stuck and then it causes inflammation. And when that happens, it's called diverticulitis. So diverticulitis causes pain, can cause bleeding, can cause an abscess to form, can even cause a little hole to develop in the bowel, which can make you very sick. And these little holes can also form and connect the bowel to other things like the vagina or the bladder. So there's this direct little tunnel between the two, and this is called a fistula. We aren't totally sure what causes diverticula to form, but we think it's probably related to a combination of genetics and a low fiber diet. We think that having a high fiber diet may protect us against the development of a diverticular disease. It also looks like the risk of diverticulitis, so inflammation of those little pockets, looks like the risk occurring from diverticular disease may be higher if you have a low fiber diet. So another good reason to look at the fiber in your diet, ladies. Now, fiber also helps reduce the risk of colorectal cancer and several other cancers, and there are several ways that it does this. That stool bulking we talked about allows waste to pass through the colon more quickly, so the lining of the bowel isn't exposed for longer periods of time to carcinogens as it would be if things are moving really slow through the bowel. Those short-chain fatty acids we talked about that are made when the gut bacteria ferment the fiber, they also have anti-cancer properties, and they can stop cell growth and promote apoptosis, which is cell death, in cancerous cells. And just having a healthy gut microbiome from a fiber-rich diet can help play a role in cancer prevention in and of itself. Okay, now let's talk about how fiber can help you manage your weight. First, it helps you feel full for longer. It does this by taking up space in your stomach, and it slows down how quickly the food leaves your stomach. And it can trigger the release of satiety hormones, so the hormones that make us feel full and satisfied. This effect is strongest with certain types of fiber, so that viscous soluble fiber we talked about. Now, if you want to get right down to the nitty-gritty, it is the viscous soluble fibers that are responsible for lowering cardiovascular and metabolic risk. In fact, there's a recommendation for those who have type 2 diabetes that they should supplement their diet with viscous fiber because viscous fiber has been shown to significantly improve blood sugar control and insulin resistance. Commonly recommended viscous fiber supplements are Metamucil and Benefiber, which is just wheat dextrin. Some good sources of viscous fiber in our foods include oats, legumes, lentils, chia seeds, fresh fruits, and vegetables. But many foods contain both soluble and insoluble fiber, so there is currently no recommended intake specifically of viscous fiber. And because different types of fiber are better at doing different types of things, it is best to get your fiber from a wide variety of sources so you get all the other beautiful nutrients that come with it. The current recommendation, as we talked about earlier, is at least 25 grams of total dietary fiber, and this has been associated with a risk reduction in cardiovascular disease outcomes. And as I said, also as we age, there is evidence that we should be taking in even more. I aim to get at least 30 grams a day. Okay, so I promised that I would give some of my go-tos, how I get that much fiber in a day. I start my day off almost every day with all brand cereal, which gives me a good whack of fiber right out of the gate. I think I get around 12 grams in that, and that is with some type of fruit. At the moment, I'm having blueberries, but raspberries are very high in fiber. Pears are very high in fiber. When I've got figs in season, I put figs in there because I can walk right outside my door and grab some beautiful figs. Really nice. Banana's nice in my all brand. Anyway, some kind of fruit in my all brand. I have a generally pretty big breakfast actually, because I like to get all the way to lunch without even having one little stomach anything, right? I hate to be hangry. So I have a piece of high protein, high fiber toast with a little breakfast sausage that I make from scratch, a turkey breakfast sausage. So it's high in protein. So that's my breakfast. For lunch, I do have lots and lots of salads still, but now I add things to them, like I have avocado pretty much every day. Avocados are very high in fiber. I have maybe beans or legumes or some kind of maybe a wild rice or a brown rice or something like that in the salad, mixed in with the salad. And then for dinner, again, I have probably 2 or 3 veg with dinner every night, and often have some kind of a potato or a sweet potato as well along with that. And then for snacks during the day, after lunch, I often will have a little something sweet. And one of the things I really like to have is it's like a high fiber candy. I have a few bits of that before I head back to work. There's a particular brand, Fun Day, here in Australia that has these like little sour gummy bears or sour peach hearts. They make these raspberry cream, like kind of chewy lollies. So you don't really want a heap of them. Don't eat the whole bag. It's just a small bag. I generally just have a few just to kind of get, a little bit of my sweet tooth out of the way. And between all of that, I generally am hitting about 30 grams a day on average. So I hope that helps you get your fiber in too. You can also add in some psyllium husk. So instead of buying the Metamucil, buying a big bag of psyllium husk, which you can get much less expensive, and you can add that into lots of different things. Or you can just get some Metamucil because they make it very palatable with a flavor, and you can supplement your diet with that as well. Psyllium is a soluble fiber, as we talked about, a soluble viscous fiber, and does have all of those great benefits. And as I talked about with the recommendations for type 2 diabetics, that psyllium is one of the things that's recommended because we know that it can give you all those benefits, including helping out with managing your blood sugar levels. So there you go. You know a whole lot more about the gut, I hope. And I hope that I have enticed you to come along to the fiber party. Trust me, you're much happier when your gut is working well. And if you do come along to the fiber party, make sure that you start low and go slow, because your gut will not be happy if you go from less than 12 grams to 30 grams overnight. Trust me on that one too. I didn't get a chance to really go into gluten intolerance and celiac disease. That is a topic that I really would like to cover in detail in the future. So watch this space, because that will be one of the upcoming episodes. So guys, I hope you've enjoyed this episode at least half as much as I enjoyed putting it together for you. And fiber, just so you know, is one of the things that we work on in my Midlife Reset program. We work on troubleshooting how to get that much fiber, because each of us are different in what we like and what our bodies really maybe respond to a bit better. So yeah, if you're interested in making a change in your life, if you've been wanting to make some healthy habit changes and struggling maybe to do that on your own, would like maybe a bit of accountability or some group support or some expert support from yours truly, I'll leave a link in the show notes in case you want to come and check out the program and see if it's something that you might like to do too. I will be opening the doors soon to welcome in another lovely group of ladies to work with for the next few months. I'm really excited about that. And hopefully I get to meet you on the other side. Before I go, I want to take a quick opportunity to thank all of you for taking the time out of your busy schedules to have a listen. I really appreciate all of your support. I'm loving the feedback that I get from you. It just reminds me that I'm not here just talking to thin air. I have now just crossed over 750 cities that the podcast is being listened to in, and over 45 countries. I think I'm up to 46 now. It's really exciting. Thank you so much for your support. And if you can think of someone who might benefit from this episode, please pass it on. And if you haven't yet rated or reviewed the podcast, could you take a second now and just give me a quick review and or rating? I would really appreciate it, guys. Have a great week, everyone. And until then, I hope you opt to thrive.
The Opt to Thrive podcast is designed for information purposes only and is not engaged in the giving of medical advice. The information provided on the podcast should not be used for diagnosing or treating a health problem or disease. In no way should the information provided by Opt to Thrive be considered medical advice, and at all times the advice of a medical professional should supersede recommendations from Opt to Thrive. If you have or suspect you may have a health problem, you should consult your healthcare provider. The views expressed in this podcast are purely that of Dr. Sims and do not in any way reflect those of the institutions she contracts for medical services to.
Thank you for listening to Opt to Thrive. If you've enjoyed listening, please rate and share the podcast. You can visit our website at opttothrive.com and leave a comment for any subjects you would like to hear more about.